Hey guys, Jason here. This afternoon we're going to be calibrating, or I should say recalibrating my own personal TV. I thought this would be a good opportunity to not only do it because it's been a while, but it's like, well, might as well do it live and let everybody kind of watch and ask questions and yeah, and kind of go through the journey with me. A little bit about the TV. It's about 2 years old. It's a 65, it's an LG 65 C8 OLED. I recently moved it from out in the living room into the bedroom. In the living room, it wasn't getting a whole heck of a lot of use. I think I had about 80 hours on it. I originally calibrated the TV at about 10 hours. And if you guys have done calibration before, you know that it's really, really important to break the TV in and give it some time before you start hammering on it. There's certain things that are not going to hold up very well over those first initial couple hundred hours that are very critical. So things like the white balance, things like the color gamut, those things do shift, and those first couple hundred hours are critical. And I kind of wanted to show you guys that live. Again, the TV was calibrated brand new out of the box with about 10 hours on it. And I just checked just a moment ago, and it looks like we're up to 295 hours. So I've definitely put a lot more time on it since I moved it into the bedroom. By the way, guys, 65 inches in the bedroom, not being very far away from it's pretty awesome. I had a 55 before, and I didn't realize how much bigger the 65 was going to look, but wow, it's much bigger. So I highly recommend it if if you guys are in a situation to put that big of a TV in your house. The other thing I did that really helped a lot with the overall picture quality is I hung a black sheet up behind the TV, so the whole entire wall behind the TV is completely black, and it gives it this totally new sense of depth, and the contrast is just out of this world. One of the reasons why I love the OLED so much, and why I went with one personally. So this session that we're going to be doing today, it probably will go over an hour. I know myself. I'm not going to try to lie to myself and say that I can get this all done in 60 minutes. I will be recording it though, so if you guys if you can't stay on for more than an hour, that's totally understandable. You can always go back and rewatch the rest of the session later. I really wanted this to be a little more casual and a little more fun, so I'm not going to put everybody through a bunch of slideshows and PowerPoints and things like that. I just wanted to kind of jump right into it. Tom's going to stick around for a while. Tom Devine, our marketing manager, is watching the question box, so if you guys have any questions, feel free to type those in. Once Tom drops off eventually, I'll keep my eye on the question box. And guys, this is going to be fun. It's going to be real casual. So if you want to ask a question, I can unmute your microphones and whatnot, or you can type in your questions. But this is meant to be a little more of a fun session. It's the end of the week. I know everybody's nerves are shot. At least mine are. I'm not going to lie. But I do want to have a little bit of fun going into the weekend. And I do see some familiar faces and some names in the attendee box. So thank you guys so much for coming and checking it out this afternoon. Yeah, I see Kristen, Helson. Oh man, lots of friends. Jonathan, Joel. Yeah, cool guys. Glenn's here. Brad, Chris, Eddie. Yeah. So thanks a lot, guys, for hanging out. The first thing I need to do though is I need to kill some of these lights. I do have a bunch of lights on in the room, and I've got a window open so you guys can actually see me on this webcam. So bear with me for about 60 seconds or so. I'm gonna turn off my webcam. I'm gonna mute my microphone, close windows, turn off lights, and then I'll switch over to the webcam that's facing the television so you guys can see everything that I'm doing. You guys will be able to see the television. I've got a webcam aimed at it, and I've also got, I'll have my Calman screen. You guys might actually be able to see that now. So you guys can actually see everything that's going on. And again, don't be shy, ask questions. Use that hand raising tool if you need to. That's a good way for me to see it. Again, Tom's going to be here for at least the first little bit of it. So yeah, guys, let's have some fun. So hang tight. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my camera, and I'll be back in about 30 to 60 seconds, barring nothing terrible happens. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Hey guys, Tom here. I'll be in the background most of the time. I see Jonathan's lighting up the question area, and I love it because I don't want to answer any of those. We'll let Jason read all these funny questions. But I appreciate you guys. Make sure that we do just put all the questions into the questions area, and then we'll just have Jason go through these as well. And I'll just have Jason, when he gets back, open up the actual window, so he'll be able to see all the questions as well, like I always do, and then he'll be able to get to address exactly what you guys are saying. So But thanks guys for tuning in, guys and girls, and people of all shapes and sizes, for tuning in. It's going to be a really fun afternoon. I know everybody is crazy, like he said, but looks like Jason's coming back now. Looks like he's the monster from the Black
Yeah,
Lagoon and that.
give me a
Yeah,
second. I'm just gonna switch cameras over to my other webcam, and hopefully you guys now can see the TV screen.
Yep, we sure can, Jason. We can see the TV screen, and then you can also see Calman. And then
Okay,
for
great.
all the viewers out there, there's a slider bar in between on your viewer, and you can slide that up and down depending on which screen you wanted to see bigger or smaller. So just make sure you utilize that.
Cool,
And
awesome,
then
Tom.
Jason,
Thanks for
you
that.
should have the questions tab pulled out because Jonathan has a lot of funny things to say.
Oh
And
yeah, he's Jonathan's a good guy. He's a calibrator out of the Dallas area. Very
that's
cool,
awesome.
very cool. So it looks like so I've got Brad has a question right off the bat. If I'm just doing consumer display calibrations, is there much of a reason to get CalMan Ultimate compared to Video Pro? Do you feel the customer reports and workflows are used often? Brad, great question. I do have Ultimate myself, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't find myself utilizing some of those advanced functions very often at all. I think if I were in your shoes and you're just doing consumer stuff, the regular Video Pro package is plenty. You have all the different workflows for the AutoCals, and you have workflows in there for video walls. The Ultimate just lets you do a lot more custom stuff, and it might sound like in your particular case that the Video Pro version will save you a little bit of cash and still be able to do everything that you need. So hopefully that answers that question. Oh, and Jonathan just corrected me, Tom. He's in the Houston area, Houston, Dallas. I don't know Texas all that well. I hope to get out there a little bit more pretty soon. I love Austin. I have had a lot of fun in Dallas before. We did a class in Houston last year. That was really cool. So yeah, cool. All right, guys. So I'll keep this question box open just so I can see everything. And all right, well, let's get started. So just real quick, the way I have this setup configured right now, I'm using a Murideo 6G signal generator. I'm using a Klein K10 colorimeter. I'm not going to be doing a profile live with you guys, only because I've already profiled this TV in the past with my spectroradiometer. I have a Jetty 1511, which is actually back in Germany right now, being recalibrated. I've had it for a year now, so it's off for service. So I should have that back hopefully in the next couple of weeks, barring any strange things with shipping that we might see over the next little while here. But the good news is that I still have the profile saved from the first time I profiled this TV with the Jetty. So I'm just going to use that profile that I used before, which is totally fine. I've already profiled this TV with those 2 meters, so I'm just going to reuse that profile. No worries there at all. Again, I've got the 6G generator. I'm using CalMan Ultimate, and I'm going to be going through the SDR AutoCal, the HDR AutoCal, and the Dolby Vision AutoCal. And the idea here is just going to kind of walk you guys through what I'm doing, what my thoughts are, things I'm seeing. And again, feel free to chime in. You might have some cool tips that you've seen before. The cool thing about calibrators is that everybody's got their own methods and tricks and tips. I've calibrated lots and lots of these TVs, but I'm certainly open to learning something new. Absolutely. So if you guys do see anything that you want to ask about, or you want to point out, or you want to chime in on, then absolutely feel free. So with that being said, the first thing I'm going to do here, after opening up CalMan, I'm going to go to this big menu screen right here. We're going to pick Start Calibration Session. Of course, I say Start and I click Save. So Start Calibration Session. I'm just going to rename this something that I know that I can keep for my records later, because I like to keep track of this stuff. So this is my 65C8 recalibration with 295 hours. Okay, cool. So I can look this up later. So I did make a little profile for myself because I calibrate my own TVs, of course. So I'm just going to pick me as the customer, and the display. There's my 65C8. You can see my old Panasonic plasmas there, my old 55C7s there. Cool. So I'm going to pick the 65C8, and we're going to jump straight into the LG AutoCal workflow. Now, if you're new to LG, or if you're new to this, a lot of people always ask me, how do I find the hours on the TV? How do I know there's 295 hours on it? There is an hours counter inside of these TVs. Keep in mind, this is only for, as far as I understand it, at least, this is only the North American models. So if you guys are watching from Europe, perhaps, Maybe Chris, if you're on, maybe you can chime in here and let me know what you're seeing. But rumor on the street is that there's no hours counter in the European models for some reason, but we definitely have them in the North American model. So the way you find that is I'm going to press and hold the settings button on the TV. We're going to go down to general. And then if we go down to about this TV, I'm going to highlight the model number and press enter. And we should have, let me move this little window out of the way. We should have total power on time, 296 hours. So I got the TV turned on a little while ago, let it warm up a little bit. Actually, that's a really good point to bring up, guys. The one thing that you want to be careful to do here is, don't turn the TV on and immediately start calibrating it. I like to give the TV at least a half an hour of warm up time before I start calibrating it. And what I really like to do is I go ahead and put the meter up there against the TV so that the meter and the television kind of warm up together, if you will. If there's any differences in temperature, maybe if the meter's been inside of a cold case all day and I put it up next to a warm TV, it takes a little bit of time for those two things to level out. If I start taking readings right away, I might not necessarily trust those readings because there's a temperature difference between the meter and the panel. So it might be a little precautious there, but I do like to do it. As far as warming up the TV, if you're dealing with a regular customer, just have them turn the TV on and just put the news on or something, no big deal. When I do my own TV or if I get to the client's home nice and early, I'll usually use like a plain white, the plain white screen that you see up here, or I'll use the rolling or the moving ramp pattern, which I really like as well. Which you guys have probably seen that before, and that is going to be this guy right here. So it looks like Chris just did chime in. Maybe he was responding to my question. Oh, yeah, so he just mentioned that the Jetty meter comes from Germany, and absolutely. I mean, it took me many years to kind of get to a point to where I wanted to buy that series of a meter, and I'm so glad I did. It really has helped my calibrations a lot more accurate, and the fact that I can just walk around that meter and just point and click. It has a nice big LCD screen on it. I wish I had it here so I could show you guys, but it's got a nice big LCD screen on it, so I can I can like point at my taillights if I want to and see what color red they are. So it's a really cool device. It comes from Germany, very well engineered, and again, just an overall great piece. So thanks, Chris, for that. Okay, so jumping back over to CalMan, I've titled the calibration. I've got all the customer information, which is just me anyway. I've got the display here, and I've got the correct workflow chosen. So I'm gonna go ahead and click Start Session. And this should be pretty interesting, guys, because again, this TV, I haven't put a meter up on it in about 280 hours or so. So I'm very curious to see how much it's drifted from 10 hours to 295. If I had to guess, a lot of times what I see during that break-in time is that we lose some blue. That's not all the time, but that's just what I've seen in the past, in my experience at least. So it'll be interesting to see how much the white balance has drifted and how much the color gamut has drifted. So first we're going to do the SDR calibration. I'm going to go ahead and pick SDR right here. Now, my devices, my generator, my meter are already connected. I know that because I've got a green light right here. But if I needed to connect the meter and the generator, I would just click Find Meter, pick the right COM port, and let her rip from there. You guys have probably seen this many times, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Same thing with the source. We're going to go find source, pick the Murideo, pick the 6G. And then we're all connected and we're all lit up here. Now, one thing that they do recommend, and I certainly recommend following any recommendations that you see here in CalMan, 99% of them are very good recommendations. I'll talk a little bit about some of the ones that I kind of stray from sometimes, but for the most part, every single recommendation they make in here is bang on. So they let you know over here that for an OLED that we should be using oh, Helson said that the volume's kind of low. Does anybody else have low volume? Should I sit closer to the mic? Tom, how do I sound to you? Ooh, maybe Tom dropped off. So, okay, cool. So maybe Helson, maybe just crank up your volume a little bit, or maybe throw on some headphones because everybody else says the volume's pretty good. Okay, cool. So they do give us a recommendation here for our test patterns. We're going to want to use 10% Windows. So I do want to jump into the Murideo generator settings really quick and make sure that no, you're good, Helson, no worries, man. I want to jump into the generator settings here and just make sure that the generator is ready to rock and roll for SDR. So I'm going to click this Open Settings Panel button. I could also go here, either way. This panel is going to open up. Now my window size, we're going to go ahead and change that to 10% Windows. That's what's best for OLED. We're going to make sure the resolution is 1080p. and I'll just pick 1080p 24. It doesn't really matter what frame rate you pick. I'm just kind of a creature of habit, and that's what I tend to always pick. So we're gonna go 1080p 24. I'm gonna keep the color format at 444. The bit depth is gonna be 8, of course, because we're talking standard definition. And of course, we'll keep the HDR off because we're doing SDR. And that's really all you have to do, guys, to get the generator ready to go. 1080p, whatever frame rate you want. I like to go 444 on the chroma. You don't have to do 444. In fact, if this in a live environment, what you would really want to do is mimic the source as close as you can. So, if you do have a Blu-ray player as your source and that's 444, then you want to set your generator 444. I have most of my stuff set to 444 anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. HDR is going to be off, of course, and that's really all I have to do here. So I'm going to close this window. I do want to show you in the meter that I've got the Klein chosen here. The OLED for the meter mode is not necessarily that important to pick right here because I am using a profile. Now, if you notice, you'll see if I open up my my meter profile tab, I profile every TV I work on. Every single customer I work on, I make a profile for them. So you can kind of see here all the different profiles I have stored in CalMan right now. If I look around here, I'll find somewhere is my 65C8. So that's the profile that I made the last time I calibrated this TV. Now for the display, we do need to connect directly to the display because this is going to be an auto cal. So first thing I'm going to do is click Find Display. I'm going to make sure that it's LG, and I want to make sure that it's a 2018 Alpha 9. Their model numbers are listed here: C8, E8, G8, W8. I'm going to go ahead and pick C8, and I need the IP address of the TV. So how am I going to find that? I'm going to go into the TV settings. We're going to go to the network settings, and I'm going to choose Wi-Fi. Oop, just kidding. I am hardwired. I forgot I hardwired this one. So we're going to go here, and I've got my IP address right here. So it is 192. Dot, oops, 192.168. I seem to not be able to type today for some reason. 192.168. Oh my gosh, what is going on here? 192.168.86.30. Now, as I said, I'm hardwired to this TV with Ethernet, but you don't have to be. In fact, all their testing that they've done with CalMan and in the labs and whatnot has all been with Wi-Fi. So don't be afraid to use Wi-Fi. I use it all the time. The only thing I will give you a warning with Wi-Fi is if you're in maybe a business or something or studio perhaps where the Wi-Fi has like a two-step authentication where you have to like sign in or something. That's not going to work. So if you're in a normal Wi-Fi environment, knock yourself out, go Wi-Fi. But if you're in an environment where there's a second step to authenticate the Wi-Fi and sign on to the Wi-Fi, your best bet is to hardwire directly to the TV. You can do that from your laptop. You can maybe carry around a little small router with you. I've seen guys do lots of different things. Okay, so now that we put the IP address of the TV in, CalMan's asking us for a PIN. The PIN number on the TV right now is 448 38 086. So I'm going to click OK. And what we should see is calibration start in the upper right corner of the TV. That's great. So far, so good. And up here in the upper right corner, I have the LG 2018 OLED with a green light here. So that means that we're all ready to go here. So my generator's connected, my meter's connected, my TV's connected. We're ready to start the session here. Jonathan just asked a question: how do you set up a profile for a TV? Jonathan, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here. Are you talking about making a profile with two different meters? Is that what you're asking? I selected a TV profile. I did? I'm not sure. Let's talk offline. I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to right now, but we can get through it. No big deal. Now, what you guys will notice right now, the TV defaulted into a cinema picture mode. And what you may have noticed is that the picture got really dark. So I listen to a ton of music, and I use Tidal, and I play CDs and that kind of thing. And being an OLED, one thing I'm nervous about is burn-in, just like the rest of us are with OLED. So I just make it a habit, and I've shared this little trick with lots of my own private customers. But if you're going to have a lot of text on the screen and you're worried about burn-in and things like that, I use the cinema mode, and I'll crank the OLED light all the way down, and I'll crank the contrast down really, really low. That way, if I have bright white letters on the screen while there's a black background, I don't have to worry about burn-in or anything like that. So I do use the cinema mode with a very, very tuned down contrast and OLED light, just because there's a lot of text on the screen. And if I'm listening to a long album or something, the last thing I want is like like if I'm listening to a Tool album that's 2 hours long, the last thing I want is the word Tool burned into my TV. So I do have that turned down specifically for that specific reason, but I'm not going to calibrate in the cinema mode. I'm going to calibrate in the ISF dark mode. So we'll change that and get going here pretty soon. Helson just asked a question: if you have a spectro and a colorimeter, is it wrong to do a 4-color matrix method profiling if it's the same panel, or did you choose that profile because it's your TV? So Helson, I made that profile with this TV the first time I calibrated it. So if this was a brand new TV, or if it was a customer's TV, it wasn't my own, then yes, I would make a brand new profile with the Jetty and the Klein. Okay, Jonathan, so that was the profile you were talking about. Yeah. So Jonathan, that profile populated because I've made that profile in the past. If I hadn't made that profile before, then I would have made a new one today right here with you guys. But I already had that profile in CalMan, so I'm just going to go ahead and use it. Okay, so color space, we're going to go Rec 709. I'm going to leave the HDR box unchecked. We're going to do SDR first, and we'll do HDR later. So I'm going to click next. And for my targets, so I'm going to do my dark mode with you guys. I'll do my bright mode later. The process between the bright mode and the dark mode is exactly the same. I just have some different targets. Just to save a little bit of time, I'm just going to do the dark mode with you guys here today. So I've got to pick my targets for the dark mode. So we're definitely going to be D65 for the white point. We're going to be Rec 709 for the color space, and we're going to go with 1886 for the gamma. 1886 is kind of the latest standard for gamma for SDR. We've used different values for gamma in the past, but that was finally something that was standardized back in, I believe, 2011. So any newer content that I'm going to be watching in the night mode, we're going to use the 1886 gamma, which is very, very close to the 2.4 gamma. So the black levels are on the dark end, especially, are going to be a little bit darker, but in a pitch black room like what I'm dealing with here, and I'm not sitting that far away from the TV at all, then I can definitely get away with a 2.4, in this case 1886, no problem. Now, if the room has some light in it, or the customer's sitting a little further away, even if the room is dark, I might go with a 2.2. If you're sitting far away from the TV, it might be harder to see shadows. So if the room's got some light in it, or something like that, then I might go with a 2.2. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the 1886. Now, one thing that we have to do for the OLED is turn on the pattern insertion. The last thing you want with the OLED is to be taking readings of a specific level of the grayscale or a specific color, and it's up there for 3 or 4 minutes as you're calibrating it, and there's some image retention. If I'm calibrating, say, cyan, and the cyan test pattern's up there for 5 minutes, and then I move on to magenta, I don't want that cyan to kind of stick around and pollute the magenta reading. So we have to use this pattern insertion. What the pattern insertion does is, in this case, every 5 seconds, for 5 seconds, there's going to be a 25% full field up on the screen. And that just kind of gives the TV a break, if you will. So there's not just a rectangle shaped test pattern on the screen for several, dozens and dozens of minutes at a time. This will kind of give the panel a little bit of a rest, or a little bit of a break every 5 seconds. So I just stick with whatever CalMan recommends as their defaults for the pattern insertion. And in that case, if you click the button over here, it'll automatically populate the correct setting. So we're going to go ahead and enable the pattern insertion. We're going to use the SDR default. So every 45 seconds for 5 seconds, there's going to be a 25% or 25 percent stimulus full field up on the screen. Now for the AutoCal Delta E formula, we've all been using Delta E 2000 for many years, and that's what I learned on. But the Delta errors have gotten more and more accurate and a lot better over the years. In fact, if you guys go and check out, it's either going to be on SMPTE's YouTube page, or it might be on Portrait Display's YouTube page. But Tyler and Catherine from from CalMan, from Portrait Displays, they recently did a 30-minute talk at SMPTE conference, talking about how much better the delta formulas are now. So if I can use a better delta formula to get even more accuracy, I'm going to go ahead and do that. So what CalMan recommends over here for maximum accuracy is the delta error formula called ITP. So if I open up this drop-down screen, we're going to go with delta ITP, and now I'm going to have a really super tight delta formula to dial this TV in. Looks like another question came up from, it looks like Glenn. Do you use profiles for TV technology or both technology and, let's see what's the rest of that question say. Come on, mouse. And for an individual display. So Glenn, if you notice in the drop-down screen for the meter, you have a meter mode here. So I can pick whatever type of TV it is, right? But here's the kicker. If I'm using a profile, that overrides whatever I pick here anyway. Now, just me being kind of a weirdo and kind of a, everything has to have its place, I do pick OLED here for sure, but then I also use my profile down here as well. So even if I picked LCD or plasma up here, it's not a big deal because this profile is going to override that anyway. Hopefully that makes sense, answers your question. So go back to my C8 right there, boom. Oh, John, yeah, that's the meter. Jonathan, I made the profile with my 2 meters. There's a video on YouTube that shows you exactly how to do it. Again, I can't do it here because I don't have that other meter. It's off at service still. Okay, now we can go next. Now this is the pre-calibration capture. So I calibrated the TV previously in the ISF dark mode. So I want to switch back over to that mode. I can do that in a couple places. I can go here, change the mode to ISF dark, or in this case, it's listed expert dark, or I could just pick up the remote and do it that way too. Now you guys probably just saw the screen get a lot brighter. That now I know I'm in the right mode. And if you want to really be cautious of this, you can pop into the menu here, check out your picture settings, and it's back in ISF dark mode. So we're going to go with the ISF dark mode. Now the pre-calibration should be interesting because again, this TV has had about 280 hours on it since I calibrated it the first time. So I'm going to click the read series button. And let's see how she's doing. And I might want to turn that down. That might be loud for you guys. And Jonathan, yeah, the settings, yeah, if you press and hold the wheel, yeah, it'll jump right over to the picture menu. I know that, but I always forget it for some dumb reason. So look at this, guys. This is crazy. The grayscale has gone, wow, grayscale's gone red. My prediction of blue was a little off. So you guys can see where the TV has drift. Looks like we might have a color space issue going on here. You can see where green is at least close to its target, but check out blue, magenta, and red. After we do a reset on this picture mode, that hopefully will tighten up. But the grayscale is really my big concern right here. You guys can see where it has drifted a lot. So this just goes to show you that if you calibrate a TV brand new out of the box, especially an OLED, it will drift in the first couple hundred hours. So you have to really encourage your customers and make sure they understand that. I mean, don't get me wrong, guys. If you want to calibrate the TV brand new out of the box for that customer, go ahead and do it. But make sure you schedule a follow-up visit. 30 or 60 days later. Let a couple hundred hours burn on that TV, and then by that time everything kind of settles down and you're good to go from there. So we have the pre-calibration view right here. We don't need to spend a lot of time here. This is just telling us how screwed up things are. So now we can move on. All right, so select picture mode, expert dark. We're going to calibrate the dark mode. And I do need to do a reset on that mode. So we're going to click reset. Give that a minute. You can probably see the TV changing in a few different ways. The reset button kind of lights up again, so I know it's done. And the enable calibration box was already checked after I did the reset. If that box is not checked, you need to check it. Going on with the rest of the calibration is going to be a really big headache for you if you don't check this box. So go ahead and check that box and move on to the next page. So luminance. So this is my dark mode. It's a very big TV in a very dark room. And I don't want it to be painful to watch TV when I'm watching at night, especially if I'm watching a bright show. I love South Park and Family Guy and stuff like that. So I don't want those cartoons to be super bright when I'm trying to watch at night. So I'm gonna go a little conservative here. I'm probably gonna aim for about 150 nits or so. I know 100 is the standard for SDR, but again, this is not a studio environment. I'm not 6 inches away from a 30-inch screen. I'm about 8 feet away from a 65-inch screen. So I'm going to go I'm going to keep it a little conservative. I don't want to go too bright, but I'm not going to go all the way down to that 100 nit standard that a lot of studios live and breathe by. So this is pretty cool. You can do this a couple ways. I'm just going to click the continuous read button, and then I can pop over here to the OLED light control. And as soon as we start taking readings here, I can lower this down. Now I'm aiming for, I'm going to be aiming for about 150 at the end. So I'm actually going to aim a little higher. I'm going to aim about 160, 165, 170 maybe, because once I get all this blue out of the grayscale, because remember I did reset the picture mode. So once I get all the blue out of the grayscale and once I get everything dialed in, that luminance is going to naturally kind of drop on its own anyway. So let me get it a little bit lower, maybe till about like 160 or so, 165 maybe. And that should be a pretty good starting point. Again, if that's not bright enough for me at the end, or if it's too dark for some reason, I can always go back and readjust that later, no big deal. Okay, so now that I'm happy with my luminance, I'm going to continue on to the next page. And this is going to be the grayscale. Now this is an auto cal thing, so this is going to be a one button push. I do have to pick a couple of things that I need to keep in mind. So if you guys are new to auto cal, what you may notice right now is that this auto cal button, which is normally grayed out, that is available. So I'm going to go ahead and click the auto cal button. Now there's a couple of options I have here for active grayscale points. I can do SDR at 26 points from level 16 all the way up to 255. I can do this at 20 points. There's a 20-point option in here somewhere. I'm gonna stick with that 26 point, 16 to 255. You know, I want to be able to calibrate those levels that are over 235. Again, the 235 is the legal limit for video, but you may have some things that are bright that live above 235. One of my favorite examples is like if you're watching a football game and you look at the home team jerseys and there's the sun's lighting up the jersey a certain way, there might actually be some detail up there. So if it's there, I want to see it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the grayscale all the way out to level 255 here. Now the delta E target, that's my threshold for my error. So the lower the number, the lower the error. When we get underneath a delta error of 1, that's considered studio accuracy or basically perfect. So I like to go a little bit more aggressive. I like to do a 0.5. That I think satisfies my perfectionist that I have in me, but also I'm kind of beating up the TV a little bit to see if it actually can do a 0.5 on the delta error, and I'm very confident that this TV can. So I'm going to use the 16 to 235 for my targets, and I'm going to use a delta target of 0.5. Now I've already clicked the auto cal button. I've set my parameters here, so I'm just going to click OK. And from here, we're just going to let CalMan and let the TV talk to each other, and the TV is going to self-adjust based on what CalMan tells it to do, based on the levels it's reading. And you can kind of use this time to maybe talk to the customer a little bit, or talk to him about room lighting and sources and those types of things too. I'm always looking for good ways to teach a customer how to get a better picture, and sometimes that comes down to the room itself and room lighting and where they sit and all these other things. So you can use this time here to kind of talk to the customer about that stuff, or if you're dealing with your own TV or you don't have a customer to talk to, you can check some emails or something. Chris just chimed in with a question or comment. Delta error ITP or ICTCP are more accurate for HDR, especially in the shadows, but the results are worse in DE2000 for calibrators. Yep, totally agree. The ICTCP and the ITP were first used in HDR calibration going back to the models just before this. It was new, I believe, in 16 or 17, and now we're using it in SDR as well. So good call, Chris. Yeah. So guys, what's happening here, as you can kind of see what's going on, CalMan is adjusting each level of the TV. It's starting off, it reads the bright level first, 100, and then it reads a couple of levels in between. And then when it starts the calibration, it actually starts up here at 100 and kind of works its way down. So this graph is showing us the EOTF, or the gamma curve. So CalMan is automatically adjusting the grayscale and luminance so it follows the EOTF curve correctly. And remember, for EOTF, for gamma in this case, we picked 1886. So this is going to be our 1886 gamma curve. And as you notice here, the luminance is so far perfect, which is awesome. Now, if you look at the grayscale, I can almost not even see the deviation on the grayscale here. You can kind of see, if I zoomed in really far, you might be able to see a little bit of the deviation here. But guys, look at the targets and look at the actual numbers. Right now, it's working on level 45 or 50 or so. Our target, of course, is 313329, and we're 312329, 312328, 313329. As we work our way down towards the darker levels, we're 311329. It fixes it to 312329. Our luminance at this point should be about 18 nits, and we're right at 18 nits. So this is great, guys. You can do this manually, but it takes a whole heck of a lot more time. So being able to do this automated is pretty awesome. Looks like another question may have come in from Jonathan. How long will this process take with the i1 Pro and the Geek Squad kits? I'd probably say double, maybe triple. So if this takes 3 minutes with a Klein, I'd say it probably would take maybe 10 to 15 minutes with an i1 Pro 2. And that's assuming you didn't profile it with another meter. And I know you guys don't have another meter to profile, but the Magnolia folks do. So if you can get a hold of one of their meters to borrow to play with, then certainly go for it. So looking really good here. We're down to about the 20% range. These darker levels are always the more difficult. So you'll notice as we're getting darker and darker in level here to calibrate, the Klein slows down a little bit and the AutoCal slows down a little bit. But no worries. I mean, it is a light meter, so it needs a lot of light. And it is a very sensitive meter, but you will notice a little bit of a slowdown as we get a little bit darker here in the calibration. What you see on the screen right now, bright white, you saw it just went away. That was the pattern insertion. So again, every 45 seconds, we see one of those patterns just to give the TV a little bit of a break. Scott just chimed in, said that he must be super anal because he does a 0.2 error. Absolutely, Scott. I totally feel you on that. I probably could do that as well, but I don't want to keep you guys here forever. I'm confident that the TV can probably do it. But as we're looking at this, guys, look at these delta errors. We're down in the 0.4, 0.2, 0.4, 0.7, 0.4. So these are excellent, excellent numbers. I mean, I know I aim for a 0.5, but under 1 is considered, studio quality anyway. So you start thinking about your pro monitors, the Sonys and the Flanders and those types of monitors, Canon and stuff. We expect those guys to be, below a 1 on the delta error. So the fact that we're getting below 1 delta error, in some cases even below that, on a consumer panel that anybody can go buy is pretty freaking awesome. So let's see where we're at now. We're down to the 5% range. It's plugging away still. Just trying to get these last couple of levels right here. 326, that's good. See, we do have a little bit of a green error here at the very, very dark end. Now, what I'm hearing about the 2020 models, I haven't seen one yet, of course. They have not been released yet. I think pricing was actually just announced the other day. One thing that's interesting about these TVs versus the new models, the new models, you can actually go in and retweak the grayscale if you're not happy with the AutoCal. Unfortunately, I can't do that on this TV. It doesn't have that capability. So going on to the 2020 models, and I'm assuming after that, if you have a little bit of a green error right here, you can go in and manually kind of tone that down and maybe add a click of blue or something to get rid of that green error. But it is at level 7 and level 10. They're very, very dark levels. If I pull up a grayscale pattern and I don't see it with my own eyes, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And plus, it's only out by a teeny tiny bit. I mean, the goal is 329 and we're at 330 and 331. So we're talking 1/1000s, 2/1000s, no big deal. Ken just had a question. Let's see what he says. So what do you do if the display calibration DEITP levels are above the target level? You could lower the target, Scott, or Ken rather, I'm sorry. You could lower it and try to go even lower. So if I set it to a 0.5 and we're hitting like 0.7, I might set it to a 0.2 and that might get us to 0.4 or 0.5. So you could always lower the target if you want to. You have to remember too that CalMan is programmed to also do this efficiently, so that if it starts seeing like these 0.4s and 0.5s and 0.6s, it's going to move on to the next level. But if you set the target to be a little bit lower, it'll sit there and plug away at it longer and longer and longer until it gets as close as it can. So you can see here, guys, 150 readings that took a little over 6 minutes. So again, if I was using a slower meter like an i1 Pro 2, I'd probably schedule this for maybe 15, maybe even 20 minutes to be safe. But guys, look at this. I mean, the grayscale, the luminance is bang on. I can't even see a gray line, which is freaking awesome. My grayscale here is, I mean, perfect basically. I don't see any bumps in any color. It's a nice straight flat line. Even if I zoom in, zooming in, by the way, if you don't know how to do this, this is kind of helpful sometimes. We're going to right click on the graph. We're going to click properties. If we go over here to the axis property, we can change this to auto. Auto is going to rescale the graph based on your biggest error. In this case, we didn't have any big errors, so it scaled to 4 as the maximum and -4 as the minimum. So even zooming in that fine, you can see that it's still a very, very consistent straight line. And the further you zoom out, of course, that line's just going to get flatter and flatter. But if you zoom way far out, now you're -40 to 40, then it looks like a nice flat line. So, you know, if you zoom in on this, don't freak out if it's a little bumpy, because remember, you're looking at a teeny tiny little window. So these little deviations right here, you'll never, ever, ever see them in the picture. And if you really get picky, you can go down here and start looking at your numbers. You've got your targets for X and Y, your target for luminance, and then the delta formula, the delta values down there. So if I look at my target, we're aiming for, you know, 3127, which we round up to 313, and then 329. The TV actually calibrated in this case to 314344. I'm not exactly thrilled to see this. That's a lot of green, but also at the same time, it's at level 2.3, which is super, super, super dark. Again, if I don't see any green in the dark part of the grayscale, when I visually look at a grayscale pattern, if I don't see any dark green when I watch a movie or pop in a horror movie and there's some dark scenes and whatnot, if I don't see it, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Now, again, this is consumer stuff, guys. If I'm working in a studio environment, my tune's a little different. I am going to go for a much tighter tolerance. I'm going to go for much more accuracy in a studio environment because, you know, those environments call for that much accuracy. But in a normal home, in a consumer TV, in a situation like this, as long as I don't see it with my eyes, I don't lose any sleep after it. Glenn, after the AutoCal grayscale, do you visually recheck black level, white level, the 6G? I found a need to increase brightness and maybe decrease contrast. Absolutely, Glenn. The CalMan AutoCal is not going to do things like sharpness and brightness and contrast for you. In theory, if you pick a gamma curve and then do the AutoCal and the luminance levels are all correct, technically brightness and contrast shouldn't have to be touched at all. But in reality, I've seen the same thing that it sounds like you're seeing, to where I typically have to bump up the brightness maybe like a click or two, and maybe decrease the contrast if there's any color shift or anything. But I'm finding myself bumping up the brightness a click or two. I'm not finding myself having to decrease the contrast much, but if you are, I mean, trust your eyes and trust your test patterns. If your test pattern says that white's got a little blue in it, or it looks a little color shifted, or maybe it looks like it's about to clip, then absolutely turn it down a couple clicks and no big deal. Always, always, always double check. So guys, there we go. In 6.5 minutes or so, the grayscale is bang on. I mean, that's phenomenal. Okay, now we're going to go on to the 3D LUT calibration, the lookup table. This is a little bit different than what you may have seen in the past when it comes to calibrating the color gamut manually. You know, normally in a normal situation where you don't have the capability of doing the lookup tables, you might have a color management system where you have controls over red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, and you manually manipulate these things in. And that's great for getting, you know, at least one level of that color calibrated. So if I'm looking at, say, green, for example, and here's my target, if I manually calibrate this TV, I can calibrate that green at 100% saturation or at 50% or at 25% or something in there. Now, I'm only going to be able to pick one level and calibrate that one level. So the problem is if I calibrate 100% green and 80% green and 60 and 40 and 20% green are a little over or a little undersaturated, there's really not much I can do about that. I have to kind of pick and choose my battles here. But with the lookup capabilities that this TV has, you know, it's going to take as many readings as I want to make the lookup table. And when we do this method, we end up with a really, really, really tight color gamut. So I don't want to keep you guys here forever. So we have a choice to make. I'm going to click the AutoCal button. Now, when we come down here for the lookup table settings for the calibration type, we can pick how many points we want to do or how much time we want to spend. And there are a couple of presets we can pick from here too. I really like the lightning lookup table. It's 101 readings. For TVs like this, it's usually plenty. You know, if you want to go crazy with it, you can go with a point-based. In fact, if I remember correctly, when I did this TV the first time, I think I did a 3,500 point lookup table, which definitely satisfied my my OCD. I remember the graphs being excellent afterwards, but I do remember it taking about 90 minutes or so, even with decline. So I'm not gonna torture you guys and make you guys sit here that long just for the lookup table. So I'm gonna keep this pretty simple, and we're gonna pick the lightning lookup table. Now there's also a matrix lookup table, which just takes a really simple reading. It takes I think it just takes black, white, red, green, blue, if I'm not mistaken, and it makes the lookup table based on just those 4 or 5 points. But the lightning lookup table will at least read a bunch of patches like in between and stuff like that. So I'm gonna go a little more than the matrix, and in this case, we're gonna pick the lookup table for that's called lightning. And of course, the video range here is 16 to 235, so nothing to change there. And all I have to do here is click OK. Now we're gonna let Calman and the TV sort of talk to each other, and Calman is instructing the Murideo generator to put certain patches up on the screen. The meter is going to read those patches and store them in a memory. So after 101 readings, the Calman program is going to do some math and make some comparisons and tell the TV how to map this color gamut. It's pretty cool. You'll see here across the bottom of the screen, you'll see the different patches and stuff that Calman's reading as it's going through this process. But you know, it's a pretty fast meter. We're already about 20 readings in or so, so this shouldn't take too long. I apologize, guys, for my webcam. It looks like it's going out of focus and in focus and out of focus. Yeah, I need to get a better webcam. That's on my to-do list for sure. I thought I was being fancy and getting this cool 1080p webcam from a very popular manufacturer, and it wasn't inexpensive by any means. And I thought it would look a lot better than this, but looks like I just have to invest into a better camera. Chris just asked a question, why'd you use 16 to 255 instead of 16 to 235? Chris, I think I mentioned this before when we were doing the grayscale. You know, the legal limit for video is 235, but every once in a while, if there's like an explosion or something in the content, you know, there might be some levels that kind of leak over closer to 240 or 245 or even 255. So I like to hit the whole range just in case. And remember, if you go back and read the white paper for video, for I believe it started in the 80s with Rec 601 when video initially was digital. The white paper it's really funny to read. It actually says 16 to 235, but can occasionally excurse above 235. And you know, the running joke is what does occasionally excurse mean? What does occasionally mean? Does that mean all the time? Does that mean sometimes? Does that mean almost never? And then excurse, what does that mean? Does that mean it goes to 236? Does that mean it goes to 254? Like, we don't know. It wasn't really defined very well. So I like to be safe and just go ahead and blast it up to 255. That way I know all my bases are covered. Hopefully that helps. All right, looks like we're getting close to the end. Let's let it do its calculation. Now it's doing the math. It looks like it's plotting it out to 20,007 different points. And let's see how it did. Calculating, calculating, calculating. Sorry guys, this is the boring part. I'll tell you guys a calibration joke while I have you here. All right, ready? Why did the calibrator get fired? Anybody know? Anybody? Oh Lord, no, that's not the right answer. Why did the calibrator get fired? Because he was being too nitpicky. Ha 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 ha. Oh, sorry, that was terrible. Hey, at least I got one laugh. Thanks, John. Feel a little bit better. I feel like that needs to be, I think I actually may have made this. And you guys know the bad joke eel meme? I think that'd be a very fitting meme for that one. Okay, cool. 3 minutes, 45 seconds, 101 total readings. Let's see how it actually did. We're going to verify the luminance, and remember I was aiming for about 150, and we're 147. So my estimation of doing 165 at the beginning got me really close to that 150, got me at 147. Oh, Harold threw in another joke too. Because the calibration is so easy, a monkey can do it. They have to be a pretty smart monkey, but you know, the AutoCal has made things easier. If you've calibrated in the past, a couple guys on the call here, maybe Glenn or somebody can attest for this. This used to take hours, guys. I used to schedule these for 6 hours. Oh, Caesar the monkey, got it. Yeah, there you go. I used to schedule these for a lot longer of time. You know, we used to have to. The software back in the day was not very good. Glenn might remember this. The old Sencore software was just basically a graph with a target. There was no instructions or what to do first, what to do second. But yeah, the Calman software has definitely made it very, very, very easy compared to what we used to have to worry about. So for the last part of the SDR calibration, we have to uncheck this enable calibration box so we can do our verification. So we're going to uncheck that and click next. And post calibration capture. So let's go ahead and fire up the read series button, and let's see how she did. First thing is going to be this EOTF. I want to make sure that that's really, really close, and it looks like so far it's fantastic. Wow, that's beautiful. Guys, look at the grayscale. It's super tight. Oh. So my maximum delta error on the grayscale is a 1.2, but the average is a 0.5. That's phenomenal. Jonathan asked, did you white balance the meter beforehand? Jonathan, that's only something you have to do with certain meters. You do not have to do that with the Klein. Okay, so let's check out the color gamut. Green's on point, so is cyan. Blue's a little red, not the end of the world. The delta error is still pretty low. It's a 3.1. My magenta's very good. My red's very good. Guys, I would say for less than an hour, and that's a lot of that with us kind of chit-chatting and stuff like that, in less than an hour, if those are my results, that is absolutely fantastic, especially for a consumer panel. Now, if this was a 2020 model, where I could go back in and manipulate some things afterwards, I probably would want to maybe try to, that little bit of a green bump right there at about 85%, that caught my eye. There's another little bump here at about 10% in green, that caught my eye. But unfortunately with the 2018 and the 19 models, once you do the AutoCal, the white balance menu is grayed out, the color management menu is grayed out, so you can't do anything about it. Now I could rerun the 1D lookup table for the grayscale and maybe the 3D lookup table for the color gamut, and maybe it would get a little bit tighter, but I don't want you guys to be sitting here for hours while I try to perfect this. I just want you to kind of see the process and see how it all goes. So, but otherwise, everything else looks great, guys. The maximum delta error is a 3.1, and that's with 100% saturated blue. I'm really curious to see the saturation sweeps from white out to blue, and see exactly how good we got here. So let's go here to next. I'm going to click on this button that says additional validation because I want to see the saturation sweeps and I want to see the color checker. So the color checker's first. The color checker is basically a torture test of the TV. The Calman's going to spit out all of these patches. These are kind of standardized patches that you might see from oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Pantone. So these might be standardized like Pantone colors. So you have this specific triplet for like a light blue sky or you know, a foliage, or there's a bunch of different skin tones in here as well. There's a couple 100% saturation points. So Calman's going to spit out all these different triplets, and the idea is that the TV measures and the triplets are correct. So let's do a read series here. White looks great. You'll notice it's going through here. It's reading the different levels of gray. Black spits out way out here. Don't worry about that black. You know, it's an OLED, so it's no light. The meter just sees nothing and doesn't really know what to do, so it just spits out a value. It ends up being way out here in some cases. But as we're looking at our targets here, everything's at least touching, which is great. Now, what I do notice with these LGs, if you do get a little more picky when it comes to the lookup table for the color gamut, we just did the lightning lookup table at 101 points. If I did want to sit here for 90 minutes or so and do the 3,500 point lookup table, then yeah, I might have these much tighter. But again, I don't want to put you guys through that time wise. This yellow is kind of poking out a little bit. There's a little orange, couple orange patches right here. The magenta is just a little out, the blue is a little out, but overall, guys, the maximum delta error is a 3.6. It looks like that's still 100% blue. That's still our little problematic blue there. But everything else, our other errors are 3.1, 2.8. And remember, guys, too, like 3.0 or below is considered like invisible to most people's eyes. So even if you're at 2.8 or 3.1, you're going to be close enough. And is it really worth your time for another 30 minutes or so or something like that to run through the workflow again, just to go from a 3.1 to a 2.9? Maybe not. Again, if I'm in a studio and we're going for perfection, I wouldn't have done the lightning lookup table anyway. I probably would have done at least 1,000 points. I think the guys over at CalMan recommend 3,500 point minimum for studio monitors. So if I did go back and redo it with more points, I probably would make this a little bit tighter. But at the end of the day, guys, this is a consumer panel that anybody can go buy. With an average delta error of 1.6 and a maximum of 3, that is phenomenal. Okay, now we're going to check the sweeps. I'm curious about the blue here in particular. Let's see how it does. Would a studio use this panel? Jonathan, that's a great question. They would as their proofing monitor. They would have one of these next to their pro monitor just to compare and make sure that things look correct on a consumer monitor. There's a couple of major studios that use LG OLEDs very, very regularly as their client. They call them a client monitor. Wow, look at blue. That's interesting. So 100% saturated blue, it's a little undersaturated. We see that because the dots, on the inside of the square. But we also notice that blue is, leaning towards red. So that 100% saturated blue is actually a little purplish. But look at the rest of blue. The rest of blue is pretty much bang on. 20, 40, 60, 80% are pretty much bang on. Now, the question you might ask yourself here, if I'm doing this manually and I calibrate this 80% blue instead of 100, I might not be able to ever get everything here correct. I might have to make a sacrifice. So if I fix this blue, it might screw up these 4. If these 4 blues are okay, it might screw up this one. So what's the lesser of 2 evils here? Do I deal with this 100% blue being a little bit off, or do I ruin the middle points of blue? Now here's $1 million question. Here's how you know how to answer this question. If any audio guys are on the call, I know John, I know you're an audio guy. Would you rather have the middle okay or the extremes? He says have 4 and lose 1. I totally agree. The middle is more important, guys. That's where most of the content lives. There's not that many cases where you'll see 100% blue on the screen. Maybe there's some football team that's very, very saturated blue, or maybe there's, I don't know, maybe there's some flower on planet Earth or something. But if this one is fixed and it screws up these other 4, it's not worth it. So this is actually okay. I'm happy with this. Now, if we look at red, 20 and 40, 60 is a little undersaturated, 80 and 100 are bang on. Yellow looks really good. It kind of does this little bit of a curve right here, but nothing to worry about. We're still in the box. Green is perfect. I mean, that's beautiful. So is cyan. That's great as well. Magenta, the hue is just a little bit off on a couple of these levels, but guys, again, this is a consumer panel. This is fantastic. So there's our saturation sweeps, and that's it for SDR. That's the SDR night mode, okay? Jonathan says you're going to have far more extreme red than you would extreme blue, I think is what he's saying. Yep, I would agree with that too. We see a lot more red than we do blue in a lot of cases. I mean, anytime you see an explosion or anything with fire or anything with red has a lot to do with skin tones too. So yeah, I agree with you there. I think you'll see a lot more 100% saturated red than you would blue. So cool. All right, so guys, that's the SDR nighttime calibration. Now, the way CalMan works, I like to give my customers a before and after performance report for every single mode that I do. But if I go in CalMan right here and I click calibrate next mode, it's not going to save any of the data from this mode. So I want to save this mode and get the report before I move on to the next one. So I'm going to click save and report. We've got my title up here, my 65 C8 recalibration with 295 hours. And I'm going to start session and save session and view report. Now, because we used the AutoCal workflow, we're going to use this calibration report as our report. Now, I know a lot of guys, if you do manual calibration, you probably use the ISF report because you use the ISF workflow, but we didn't use the ISF workflow here because we did the AutoCal. So we're going to use the calibration report for this. Looks like Glenn said something. We can go into CMS and correct red and yellow a little bit. Glenn, you will be able to do that on the 2020 models, but you cannot do that on this model or the 2019 model. When you do this AutoCal on these models, your white balance menu and your color management menu are now grayed out. So I cannot go in now and retouch this up. The only way I can touch this up is to go through the workflow one more time and make my deltas a little bit lower and maybe read more patches. That's about all I could do. But if this was next year in a 2020 model, absolutely. I could go into the CMS menu and I can maybe touch up that blue a little bit, see if it helps, maybe touch up the magenta a little bit, see if it helps. So good call though, good thinking. So here's the report, guys. Here's the before. We knew it was kind of a mess. The grayscale had gone really, really red over time, which was very interesting. The colors were all a little bit off. We all knew that stuff. Here's the after. The grayscale is nice and flat. The EOTF is perfect. Our color gamut is pretty much bang on. This is a fantastic calibration. Now, the last thing I'm going to do before I move on to HDR is I'm going to manually check the things I need to check, such as brightness and contrast and sharpness. Turn off all the noise reduction, turn off all the motion processing, all of those things. So real quick here, I'm going to pull up manually a ISF brightness pattern. Now I'm going to go ahead and say this now. You're probably not going to see anything very good on the screen here, but we'll see. Here's the brightness pattern. And according to this webcam, which as we know is not a very good webcam, it looks like everything is dark. But what I'm seeing with my own eyes, I can easily see up to about level 18. Guys, give me 1 second. I'm going to walk over to the TV and bump up the brightness a click or two and see what happens. Give me 5 seconds. All right, so the brightness at the factory position of 50, which theoretically should be correct because we did the AutoCal, it was still a little bit too dark. I got my face as close as I could to the screen, way closer than I would when I'm watching, and I still couldn't see 17. When I brought it up to 51, it was still just not quite there, and then all of a sudden 52, I could see it. Now on this TV, if I go to 53, I don't know if you'll see this or not on camera, but if I go to 53 on this TV, no, you can't see it on camera, but 53 turns the background kind of a dark gray. So the background goes from perfect black at 50, 51, 52 to a dark gray at 53. So I would not want to risk ruining the black levels of this OLED by going to 53. I'm going to go to 52. Now, in this case, it worked out because at 52, I can see number 17 and the background is still black. But if there was any lights on in this room and I had to go a little bit more aggressive, you have to think about what's the lesser of two evils. Do I ruin the black levels of the OLED, or do I sacrifice box number 17 to the to the black level gods, if you will? In this case, I don't want to ruin the black levels of the OLED. So if that were the case, I would go ahead and sacrifice number 17 to preserve the blacks. That just means that we're not going to see that very, 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 very darkest shadow, but at least the blacks are still black and they don't look washed out. Now, if there's light in the room, maybe I've got a window open and I'm combating room light, then absolutely, I probably would go to like 53 or 54. But in this case, with the room being dark and I only watch this TV at night, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 52. I don't want to risk ruining the black levels on the OLED. Now, let's just take a quick peek at the contrast pattern. And just looking at it from here, visually, it actually looks fantastic. I can see all the way up to box about 253. There's no obvious color shift. There's no clipping going on. Everything actually looks really, really good here at the factory position. I believe it's at 85, so I'm going to leave that one alone. Glenn had another question maybe, or something to add. This may vary with different gamma selections for caliber. Absolutely, Glenn. If we pick 2.2 as our gamma target instead of 1886, yeah, you're right. We might, with the black levels probably would have been a little bit lighter, and we probably would have seen them without having to readjust the brightness. That's a good call. Now, if I'm in a pitch black room, a total cave where there is zero ambient light, and I'm sitting 6 inches away from the screen, 50 or 51 on the brightness may actually be correct, but that's not reality. Reality is I'm in a bedroom. The wall behind the TV is black, but the walls next to the TV are white. At least the first half is black. The second half of that wall that the TV's on is white. If you're looking at the if you're facing the TV, the wall on the right, about half of it is black, about half of it is white. So I'm not in a cave, and I'm not sitting 6 inches away from the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this as is. Ken's got to go. That's okay, Ken. Thank you so much. Again, the recording will be up, so you can watch the rest of it later if you want to. No big deal. Okay, so let me check one more thing. That's going to be the aspect ratio and the sharpness. It's in ISF dark, so those should be correct by default anyway, but I always like to look to be safe. You're better safe than sorry when you talk about this stuff. So there's my ISF geometry pattern. It looks like the overscan's actually on. So let's kill that. We're going to take the just scan. We're going to turn it on. You guys maybe have seen that little adjustment in the TV. See how it zooms out just a little bit? I'm looking over here, and I'm looking over here at these arrows. You can see I can see the tips of the arrows now, and everything looks fine. As far as the sharpness goes, this TV, and this changes model year to model year, I feel like. But if we look in this TV, if we go down to it's either picture options or expert, let me see. Now see here, guys, real quick while I'm here anyway. The color gamut, I can't get to it. The white balance, I can't get to it. The color management looks like it's all default because we did the lookup table. So the one good thing about this is if your customer accidentally resets the TV, it's going to go back to those factory settings, which is great. You don't have to recalibrate the TV if the customer resets it. You're going to have to put in your brightness level again and maybe your sharpness level again, but you're not going to have to recalibrate everything. Your default now is the calibrated setting. So let's go back into picture options. Let's go ahead and turn this off. The true motion that I know we all love. And the one thing I was looking for, I'm not seeing right now, which is actually a good thing because I don't need to see it. Okay, so let's find the sharpness. It should be at 10 from the factory, which is correct. Okay, so that all looks great. So guys, that's it for SDR. That's it. So let's go into HDR and take a look at that. So I'm going to take this report. I'm going to export it to PDF. Come on. And this is taking way too long for some reason. Here we go. Okay, we're going to save this as my 65C8 SDR ISF dark. And I'm going to save that report for later. Now, if I wanted to, especially if I'm with a customer, I would go into the report. Oh, no, don't crash on me. No, no. Oh, no, I hope Cowman didn't just crash. Oh, no, it didn't. Okay. Kristen just had a question. You spoke about True Motion. Any commentary on the upcoming 5-to-5 pull down at 120 hertz, aka filmmaker mode? Kristen, that filmmaker mode is exactly like an ISF mode. It's just a starting point with the energy savings and all that stuff already turned off. Another question came in, can we watch the session later? Yes, we are recording it, so you can feel free to pick up later and watch the rest of the calibration with HDR with Dolby Vision. Okay, calibrate next mode. We're gonna do HDR. Our equipment's already connected, so I don't have to do anything there. I do have to change the Murideo generator for HDR, so let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna change the generator is going to go to 4K. So I'll probably pick something like 2160 at 24 frames per second. Come on. Guys, you might be seeing something happening to me that I hope never happens to you. My computer all of a sudden is being real kind of sluggish and not responding very well to these buttons. Okay, we're gonna go 4K 24. And Helson, by the way, this is my old computer. I just got a new one, but I didn't want to risk doing this with a brand new computer first try. So I'm actually using my old computer. I just got a brand new Lenovo with the OLED screen and stuff. It is really, really cool. It's a great little laptop so far. I've only been using it for a couple days, but I didn't want to risk any crazy issues with this. So I'm sticking with my old laptop for today, at least for this session. So we're gonna go 2160 24. I'm gonna keep it at 444. It is HDR, so we need to change this to 10-bit. We need to turn the HDR on. I do notice this sometimes when you turn the HDR on, the BT 2020 checkbox for wide color gamut it's already chosen. But for some reason, I don't know if this is a bug in CalMan or if it's something they're doing to maybe try to save bandwidth or something like that. But when you turn on the HDR 10, the bit depth always kicks back to 8 for some reason. So I always got to go back in here and put that back to 10, and then it will be 10-bit like it's supposed to. The EOTF is going to be SMPTE 2084. That's the gamma curve or the EOTF for HDR. We're going to go for P3 for our primary colors because this TV, not on its best day, could do 2020. And of course, our white point for HDR is still going to be D65. Nothing changes there. We're going to change the color space down here to 2020, and we're going to tell CalMan that we're calibrating HDR. So click next. Our targets are still going to be D65, and in this case, white's always the same white, no big deal. And then Rec 2020 for our color space, so I can leave that alone and click next. Now the pattern insertion for HDR, they go a little more aggressive with it because these test patterns now are going to be way, way, way brighter in HDR than they were in SDR. So this is even harder on the TV. So where the SDR defaults were like every 45 seconds for 5 seconds, in HDR and Dolby Vision, it's every 5 seconds for 5 seconds. So it's a little more aggressive. We get a pattern insertion every 5 seconds, but again, this is just here to save the panel and save it from any image retention. I'm going to go ahead and change that delta formula back to DEITP because I want maximum accuracy. I'll let CalMan catch up here. All my targets are good. My pattern insertion's turned on. My delta formula is ready to rock and roll. I can click next. And pre-calibration capture. Let's see what mode we're in. I'm going to look at the TV. The HDR logo popped up, which is good. And I'm in the cinema mode right now for HDR. So let's see how the HDR calibration held up over the last couple of 100 hours. Ooh, 730 nits, not bad. Not bad at all. I see a lot of these in the high 600s, low 700s. 730 is pretty good. I had one time that was like 790. It's like, ooh, nice, good one. Pick the right one. So gamma is not really gamma anymore, especially with HDR. We refer to it as EOTF, and we still want the same goal. We still want this gray line to follow the yellow line. HDR is a little bit different because these levels are absolute. It's not like I have a gamma setting to go in there and just manipulate this to fit. What we find out here is when we look at these absolute values, what this data is telling me is that basically the first 60% of the grayscale is a little bit too bright. Now the difference is with HDR, in SDR, if I turn the contrast up too high, I just blow out the top end. I just clip all the bright whites. But with HDR, if these individual levels are all a little bit too high, that means those levels are blown out. So it's not like anymore where with SDR, if I turn the contrast up too high and I look at a cloud in the sky, the cloud's just one big white blob. But if I'm in HDR and I'm looking at a guy in a white shirt, not nearly as bright as a cloud, if that white shirt's at say 40 or 50%, the white shirt's going to be blown out. So guys, this is not good. We're going to have blowouts in the dark and the middle of the grayscale, which is pretty much the worst parts to do it. So when we run the auto cal here, hopefully this gray line tightens up, and I think it will. Another question came in, Ray, I'm going to have to leave. How can I get the recording? Ray, I'm going to send everybody a recording afterwards, so don't worry, you don't have to do anything. Thanks for hanging out for a little while. Okay, the color gamut, again, all over the place. This is to be expected. This is, this is out of the box, if you will, or factory settings, if you will. Red's a little oversaturated, green's a little yellow, cyan's a little undersaturated, blue's a little purple, which is interesting because it was an SDR as well. Magenta's a little red, a little oversaturated. So a little bit going on here. The grayscale, not only are the levels at the beginning and the middle a little bit too bright, but we're also a little bit too red. So hopefully with the auto cal here, we'll be able to tighten all this stuff up. So we're going to change this over to HDR Cinema. That's the mode I'm going to calibrate. Let's let CalMan catch up. And we're going to do a reset right here. See how the button turned gray when I clicked it? When it turns white again, I know it's done resetting. With CalMan, if you guys have used this in the past, one thing you don't want to do in CalMan is go crazy clicking a bunch of buttons when something doesn't happen. You will make it crash. So when I click that button, it turns gray for a few seconds. When it lights up white again, I know it's reset. And then of course the enable calibration box is checked, so I know I'm ready to go to the next page. Okay, grayscale. This should look very familiar. We're going to go auto cal here. Now in this case, we cannot do the rolling. We cannot do the 16 to 255. We can't do the rolling 16 to 2. We can't do any of these. The only option here that's correct is the 20-point HDR option. You have to pick that. Now the delta E of being 0.5, I could stick with that because we are pushing the panel so hard at this point in HDR, it might not be able to get a delta error of 0.5. So if it's getting hung up or if it's not doing as good as I want to, I might start this over with like maybe a 1.0 or maybe even like a 0.75, but I'm going to do a 0.5 though. Let's see what it's capable of. Which mode would you recommend? Calibrating HDR. You could do Technicolor. That one tracks really well. Cinema tracks really well as also. Cinema Home tracks too bright. So I stay away from that one. And of course, Vivid and Standard and all those other modes are all pretty bad too. But Technicolor is totally fine. Cinema Home, I'm sorry, Cinema is fine. Don't do Cinema Home. You can't fix it. It's too far gone. So CalMan's going through. It's working on 100% right now. You can see that the deltas are dropping. It's nice and flat right here. Now it's going to move on and start reading other levels. There's 50. And I'm not sure. This would probably be a good question for the guys over at CalMan, maybe one of the engineers or something. But in manual calibration, we've always taught and always practiced working your way from the top down to the bottom. So the bright level, then these levels, and then the mid levels, and the low levels. So we always started bright and worked our way to dark. But for some reason in CalMan AutoCal, it does 100, and then it jumps to 50, and then it jumps somewhere down here. It does a couple of points, and then it goes from bright to dark. And I'm not sure the reasoning behind that. Maybe that's just the way it's programmed, or maybe there's some specific technical reason why it has to do it like that. I don't know. I just find it interesting. But either way, I mean, I'm not worried about it. It's going to do what it's supposed to do anyway. I just find it interesting that it does a couple of in-between levels before it starts going from dark to bright, or bright to dark rather. Jonathan says he thinks that it's stress testing the panel. Maybe, maybe having 100% up there and then 90% and then 80%. Maybe they're also trying to avoid, making those test patterns just all really, really bright for an extended period of time. Maybe it's to protect for image retention. That certainly could be it. Good question though. We're doing pretty good so far. Our luminance is tracking really well, at least the points that it's done so far. Now you can see that it did 100 and 50 and 25 and 75. Now it's going back to 90 and working its way down. Now you'll notice too that this does take a little bit longer because you know, we have that pattern insertion set to 5 seconds for HDR. So instead of every 45 seconds, it's every 5. So that will slow us down a little bit, but that's okay. That's normal. Glenn says avoid large changes manually. I 1,000,000% agree with you, Glenn. You know, if the control goes from 0 to 50, the factor position is 25, and you're up to into like the 40s or something like that. You know, 20, 30 clicks, it's asking for trouble. You know, try to avoid, if you can, any very, very big adjustments. Now, I do see, I did a Christie projector recently, Glenn, that had, it was granular down to 100 clicks. So going 40 clicks in that case wasn't a big deal. But some TVs only give you like 0 to 10. So you go 2 clicks and it's way too much, you know? So it just depends on how granular those controls are. But I totally agree with you, man. If you're making these really, really big adjustments, you're probably going to add some sort of distortion or some sort of artifacting into the final image. Gosh, I'm having flashbacks now of the 2016 LG OLEDs. If anybody on the webinar was around during those times, the CMS on those TVs was a complete disaster. In fact, it didn't work at all. So as soon as you touched any of the, especially like the red saturation control, even if you went 1 click, it totally destroyed the picture. So for a whole year of those TVs, we were telling calibrators, like, you know, getting phone calls left and right. Hey, the CMS looks good on paper, but when I look at an image, the skin tones look all terrible. You know, you just spent all that time calibrating the color gamut, and the picture was bad. So on the 2016s, you know, the best practice on those was to just leave the CMS alone and adjust color and tint if you can. But that was all you could do. It was a little heartbreaking because the TV had it and it didn't work. But you know, there's only so much you can do. We're not calibrators are not magicians, and we certainly can't do what the TV won't let us do. And I thought if enough of us complained to LG during that year, they might do a firmware update and fix it, and they didn't, unfortunately. But the good news is that when they did the 2017 models, it was a non-issue, and of course 2018s and 19s have all been fixed as well. It's interesting to watch it too. Like if as I'm watching the TV screen, and you guys can't see this on the camera, unfortunately, but you know, when these patches come up, they start off really almost a cyan color, and then as CalMan calculates and takes readings and stuff, you can see it. You can actually see it with your own eyes go from like this cyan colored white to like a normal white. It's pretty cool. And of course, you can see it happening in the data and these charts here at the bottom as well. Jonathan asked if I'm going to do a demo content of all 3 color spaces at the end. Probably not, just because you guys aren't going to be able to really see it on the camera anyway. But yeah, you certainly, you know, with your own customers and your own TV at home, then oh my gosh, knock yourself out. One of my favorite parts of this is the demo with the customer afterwards. So I'm always carrying around my some of my favorite new movies and you know, some of the things I've kept over the years that I know look really, really good. I just picked up, I picked up Gemini Man a little while ago. And man, not a lot of people are a big fan of the 60 frames per second. I think it's kind of cool, especially for like the action scenes and the scenes where they're underwater and fire and explosions and stuff like that. But man, the colors and the skin tones are just absolutely gorgeous on that movie. So, you know, carry around a thumb drive with you or carry around a book of discs. You know, part of this job is knocking the customer socks off afterwards. So have some good demo material with you for sure. Glenn says something. I think CalMan's doing something like a 2-point and then a 5-point, then a detail 2. That might be it, Glenn. Maybe it's doing like you know, 100, 25, 50, and 75. Maybe it's doing like a 4-point and then going back and doing it in more detail. That's a great thought. Maybe that's exactly what's going on. All right, we're getting towards the end here. Of course, these last few levels are going to be a little slower because they're darker. This was one of the reasons, guys, why I bit the bullet year before last and bought the Klein. Before I was using the C6 from Portrait Displays. It's a great little meter and a fantastic price point. But I like to go fast, and I think it's a cool toy. It's a cool meter. So I bit the bullet and bought it 2 years ago. And then last year I went ahead and bought the Jetty to replace my i1 Pro 2. And the i1 Pro 2, honestly, guys, for OLED and for LCD panels and stuff, the i1 Pro 2 is more than enough to do your profiling and stuff. Where the i1 Pro 2 has a really hard time is with laser-based projectors. The optical bandwidth of the i1 Pro 2 is about 10 nanometers, and we're looking at lasers that are like 5 nanometers. So using the i1 Pro 2 to profile a laser projector wasn't quite accurate enough for what I like to see. Jonathan asked the price point of the Klein. Retail price, Jonathan, on the Klein is $7,000. I have seen them used before. I've seen one pop up on eBay I've seen them used on eBay for like 4,500. I've heard other calibrators selling theirs used for about $5,000. Honestly, if you can pick up a used one for like $4,000 or 3,500, that'd be a really smoking deal. Anything under 5, I think, would be a fantastic deal. Especially a lot of calibrators that I know, especially take really good care of their equipment. It's always in its case. There's no nicks on it, no dings on it, and most calibrators I know take very good care of their equipment. So the used market is a great place to look for this stuff. You could always send it back to Klein to have the firmware updated and have it recalibrated if you want to. But remember, if you're using like an i1 Pro 2 or a Jetty like I have to profile the Klein, then you don't ever have to send it back into Klein to be recalibrated, because you're essentially calibrating it every time you use it. K10 and original i1 from Helson, same exact situation, man. If you are taking an i1 Pro and profiling it with the K10 anyway, then you're just as fast as the K10. Profiling between the i1 Pro and the i1 Pro 2, it's the same exact process, nothing different there. Jonathan says, how do you profile off another meter? I will, Jonathan, I'll send you that video. It's really easy to do. I think you might just be maybe overthinking it a little bit. But it's really easy to do. You basically have both meters up on the screen. You go into the meter profile underneath the meter tab up here in CalMan, tells you exactly what to do, walks you exactly through it. So you put the first meter up, it takes 5 or 6 readings. You put the second meter up, it takes 5 or 6 readings, and then CalMan creates an offset so it knows the difference between the 2 meters. And then you can go ahead and put your i1 Pro 2 or your spectral meter back in its case. And that's what's funny about it, is I spent all that money on the Jetty, and all I really use it for is to profile the Klein, and it goes right back into its case anyway. I did try doing a calibration of a computer monitor with just the Jetty, and it took what should have taken 30 minutes, took like an hour and a half. So as accurate and as awesome as the Jetty is, it is ridiculously slow. So I wouldn't recommend doing it unless you just had a ton of time. I wouldn't recommend doing the whole calibration with the Jetty. But yeah, Glenn, you're exactly right. CalMan does have a YouTube video on how to make the profile. It's a really short 5-minute video. If you go onto YouTube and just type in like CalMan meter profiling, I'm sure it'll pop right up. All right, so it looks like the grayscale is just about done. That EOTF looks fantastic. I'm sure when we rerun it at the end, it's gonna be nice and tight. What's really awesome here, and I'm very proud of this TV, we have a maximum delta error. I shouldn't speak too soon because it's doing the last 2 levels right now, but as of right now, at least, a maximum delta error of 0.4, an average delta error of 0.2. So I thought I'd be torturing this TV by setting the delta to 0.5, and it actually did a little bit better. So that's awesome. All right. Yeah, Helson, I think you just mentioned if you don't have the type of space it takes to take individual reading of 1 meter and then the other meter, yeah, you can do, like, when you do the meter profile, there's 2 options. You have a single pass or a multi-pass. I always pick the multi-pass. That way I can just use the Klein for the rest of the calibration. If you use the single pass, you have to leave both meters up there all the time, which can take a little bit more time. So I always do a multi-pass and just use the Klein for the rest of the session. Okay, so it looks like we're just about done here. It's still at level 1.4, which is super dark. You might not be able to see it on the camera. I can see it with my eyes, but yeah, you can't even see that on the camera. It's so dark. You kind of can if you look really closely. Also, too, of course, if your computer monitor you're looking at is calibrated, you should be able to see those dark levels. And let's see. Still plugging away at 1.4, it looks like. It's getting pretty close, 299,334. 320, 321, there we go. So again, the maximum delta error is a 0.4, the average is a 0.2. Guys, this is fantastic. Took about 12 and a half minutes, 164 readings. So again, if you're using an i1 Pro 2 to do this, Jonathan, I would triple that at least. So if it was 12 and a half minutes here, you'd probably be 45 minutes, maybe even an hour with your i1 Pro 2. Okay, that looks great. Let's go next. We're gonna go to the 3D lookup calibration for the color gamut. Now, guys, remember in SDR, we did the lightning lookup table. We could have also done, however many points we wanted, 1,000, 5,000. You can go up to 10,000 if you want to. With HDR, though, you can only do the matrix lookup table. So write that down, beat it into your brain, do whatever you have to do to remember that. AutoCal, matrix, and OK. And that's it, guys. You can only do the matrix lookup table with HDR. They might do more points with the 2020 models, but for C8s and 9s especially, only do a matrix lookup table for HDR. Now, so you notice there it read black, white, red, green, blue. And that's it, and the matrix is done. So we're gonna go next. Yep, there you go, 21 seconds. Not bad. We're gonna turn off the calibration for the TV. And then we have the post-calibration capture. So let me go ahead and run this. And it looks like I think Glenn may have had something else to chime in there. Let's see what he says. The client take is probably faster on the OLED black levels. Many other meters cannot read that low black level. Glenn, you're absolutely right. With the physical design of the Klein being that long tube-shaped design, you can almost think of it like a telescope. It needs to take in a lot of light. The light collector in the Klein is all the way at the back of the meter, so it has that entire length of that tube to pull light in, and that's one of the reasons why it reads really, really well down in the super dark levels. Trying to do this with like an i1 Pro 2 or even a C6 maybe might give you some really weird results. Maybe it gives you good results, but with the Klein, I know I can definitely trust it because it can suck in all that light, no problem. Now, guys, remember at the beginning of the calibration on the factory settings, the beginning of the EOTF was, the gray line was way up here above the yellow line. Look at it now, it's perfect. And then you have this nice little roll off right here where the tone mapping kicks in, which should be just over 700 nits or so. Yep, so right here. So white's bang on, that's awesome. There's red, pretty good. Green, pretty good. Blue's nice. Cyan's nice. Magenta's pretty good. And yellow, come on, yellow. Yellow's pretty good too, guys. This looks awesome. We're gonna go next. I do like to do this additional validation. I do like to do the color checker in HDR. This might not be as good as what we saw in SDR, but it might still be pretty good. Let's see. Remember, guys, in HDR, we're pushing the daylights out of this panel. So my best analogy for this, and feel free to steal it, imagine you've got the volume cranked up all the way on your stereo to where there's distortion, right? And then you try to use an EQ to fix it. You can't, right? You have to turn the volume down so there's no distortion before you start tweaking the EQ. And that's exactly what's going on here. We're pushing the TV really, really, really hard and trying to make these levels and these colors all perfect is sometimes a little bit impossible. Gains, not volume, Jonathan, I know that. Let's see how this is doing. Pretty good so far, pretty good. There's our pattern insertion. Yeah, that cyan's a little off, but it's okay. Ooh, we had a pretty nasty error at green for some reason. Wonder what that was all about. You guys see this where this green poked up right here? Ooh, that's a delta error of 9. So green's here instead of here. That's really bizarre. And then here's that weird cyan. 100%, that's what it is. It's 100% green, it's 100% cyan. Those are way under for some reason. That's really strange. Let me run this again. Let's try this one more time. And if we still have those levels off, I could rerun the lookup table. That might be a fix for this, but we probably would have to investigate a little bit further. Here comes the cyan and green, and the next, that green, man, that is so weird. All right, well, I will have to go back and kind of figure out what's going on there. I don't want to keep you guys here troubleshooting for a bunch of time, but I'm definitely gonna have to go back and look at that because that is really weird. I'm just gonna do a single reading of that green and see if that helps. No, it sure doesn't. And what about the cyan? Click cyan, hit the play button. And man, it is really, really undersaturated for some reason. So I'll come back to this a little bit later. I don't want you guys to have to sit here and watch me figure out how to troubleshoot this, but I will go back and try to fix that. It's weird because it actually looks okay on screen. It's nice and bright and it looks okay, but for some reason we're getting a really wacky reading. So let's see if that affects our saturation sweeps. Let's see here. This will be interesting to see. Let's see. Red's good. Green. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. You know, maybe guys, maybe this TV just can't hit that P3 green. And it lands where it, see where it landed up here? It landed just past 80%. So it might not be anything actually wrong. Just this TV might not hit P3 green all the way. And that makes sense too why it can't hit cyan either. We'll see too, because we have there's a workflow where we can measure the P3 and the 2020 color gamut also. Okay, so there's our sweeps. With the exception of this questionable green and cyan that we're worried about, everything else actually looks pretty good, guys. Nice straight lines. The dots are at least touching the boxes in most cases. This is great. It might not look fantastic just looking at it, but guys, if you did this test, even in SDR, to a TV 4 years ago, 5 years ago, you know, we saw these really weird curvy lines and all. This is a fairly new test. So we've only had TVs in the past 2, 3, 4 years at the most that actually passed this test pretty well. So the fact that the dots are in a fairly straight line and pretty close to their targets, this is really all we can ask for out of consumer TV at least. So let's do this. Let's go additional validation. Is it in this workflow or not? We may have to switch workflows. Okay, so I want to measure the overall color gamut coverage for P3 and for 2020. But first, I want to get the report for HDR. So let's get this report. Helson asks a good question. How detrimental is that concerning the skin tones? I remember Joel mentioning in the first ISF class back in the 90s that green was the most undesirable error. Helson, you're exactly right. When you're talking grayscale, the worst thing you could do is have extra green in there. That can destroy skin tones. It can destroy everything. If you're watching hockey, the ice looks green. If you're watching Batman, the bat suit is like a dark green color. Really, really gross. But don't confuse the primary color of green with the green that makes the mix in the grayscale. If the green primary color is a little undersaturated or oversaturated, that might affect things like grass on a football field. But green in the grayscale, a totally different conversation. That can really screw up skin tones. You're exactly right in that case. Okay, so we're going to save session, view report. And we're going to continue to use that calibration report because we use the AutoCal workflow. And it should already default to that. Great. So just for good measure, I like to click generate report so I know my numbers show up. Again, the before we tracked a little bit too bright. The first half of the grayscale, the whites were not white. They were more of a purplish white. Color gamut was kind of all over the place. And then look at our after. Nice and straight, nice and straight. And then our color points are pretty much on target where they need to be. So there's the HDR, guys. That looks fantastic. Now in HDR, if you guys remember back in SDR, we went back afterwards and manually adjusted the brightness and the sharpness, and we looked at the contrast. I'll still adjust the sharpness in HDR. The factory position on these at 10 is usually correct anyway, so you probably won't have to touch it either way. But in HDR, you do not touch the brightness and contrast controls. That will, if you raise the contrast, which I don't think you can anyway. I think it's at 100 in HDR. But if you lowered the contrast, now this gray line is going to track underneath the yellow line, which means that you just darken the entire mid-range of the grayscale. So you don't use contrast and brightness in HDR like you do in SDR. In fact, you just leave them alone altogether. So the only other thing I might do to this mode is go in and check the sharpness, turn off the motion enhancement, and make sure all the noise reduction and all those other things are turned off as well. So there's HDR. We're going to export that report to PDF. And we're going to call this one, same thing, but this time I'm going to put HDR as the name of the report. Save and good. All right, now there's one other thing I want to check in HDR. I always do this for my own customers as well. There's another workflow up here under analysis called HDR Toolkit. This is a bunch of tests for HDR. It's not necessarily a workflow for calibration. It just has a bunch of tests in here, like the saturation sweeps, which you've already seen, things like that. Helson asks, with green aside, if you were at a crossroads, would you rather a blue error or a red error? I always choose blue, but correct me if I'm wrong. Helson, you're bang on, buddy. Blue is the color that we're least sensitive to. So it goes green and then red and then blue. So avoid green errors. If you can avoid red errors, if you have to error anywhere, error towards blue on grayscale, no big deal. So here's the HDR analysis toolkit workflow. Let's first, I want to check the gamut coverage of P3. So all I have to do here is click read series or this button over here, measure gamut coverage. There's white, there's red, there's green, there's blue. There's cyan, and there's magenta, and there's yellow. So we're at about 80, 90, or 88, 90% here of P3. I was honestly expecting this to be a little bit better. I'm not gonna lie, I was really hoping to be like in, at least 95, maybe even 97%. But we're not there, so that's okay. It's still 90, 88%. Not what I'd like to see. I really wish it was a little bit higher, but without going back and rerunning lookup tables and things like that, I could go back and do that. But again, you guys don't have hours to sit here with me, so I'm not going to put you through it. I also want to check the 2020 gamut coverage. This is probably going to be in the 60s or 70s, which is okay. Remember, this is 2020. This is a humongous color space, so I wouldn't expect it to get really anywhere close, but I still like to see the numbers. And I'm just dying for the day of being able to see a TV that actually does the whole 2020 color space. That'll be pretty awesome. Yeah, just like I said, 68, 80, 78, depending on the version of the CIE chart you look at. So again, not a big deal. I just wanted to see the numbers. Okay, now we're going to go back to the LG template, and we have to do the Dolby Vision. And the Dolby Vision, guys, is almost exactly like the HDR. Very, very similar. Let's load that workflow. And come on. I'm not going to go clicking buttons. I don't want it to crash. There it goes. Okay, we're going to go Dolby Vision. Okay, we have to make sure of a couple things here. The dynamic tone mapping is turned off. They do give you a couple of notes down here. Make sure you follow those. Let's see here. HDR 2020, that's all good. DCI P3, that's fine. This is just a validation page to make sure that the generator is able to get Dolby Vision to pop up on the screen. I have a black background and a white rectangle. That's what I'm seeing on the TV over here, so that's correct. If this comes up with a red background and a yellow rectangle in the middle, that means that the TV is not displaying Dolby Vision correctly, or the generator is not outputting it. So you have to go back and kind of see what's going on there and why it's doing it. But we're all good there. That's fine. Pattern insertion, we're going to leave that alone. 5, 5, and 25. I do want to switch over to the ITP formula because I want the accuracy. And let's do the pre-calibration in Dolby Vision. Let's go up here and make sure in Dolby Vision. Okay, we got a Dolby Vision logo on the TV. Very good. And let's take some readings. That's interesting. In Dolby Vision, we're 715 nits. In HDR, we were 733. Not that 15, 18 nits is going to make a really big visible difference. It's just funny that it's so different. Now the Dolby Vision is actually tracking a little better than the HDR did. As I say that, it's getting worse and worse though. So at the very beginning, at about 10%, that level's too bright. So those shadows are going to be washed out. And starting at about 30 or 40%, all of these levels are too dark. So we got a little bit of a mess here, but it's fixable. Jonathan says 4 hours to calibrate my TV with my meter. Yep, Jonathan, you have an i1 Pro 2. I'd put 4, maybe even 5 hours aside. What gets really painful, Jonathan, on with that meter is reading the dark levels. It's like 5% and those like little 1.4% and stuff. That meter just really has a hard time reading those dark levels. Okay, so the grayscale is too red, the EOTF is off, the primary and secondary colors are off. This is common after a reset. Okay, so we're going to switch this over to Dolby Vision. Cinema Home tracks too bright. I don't like it, so I like to use the Cinema mode. So we're going to switch over to Dolby Vision Cinema. We're going to reset the picture mode. Now, there's one reminder that CalMan gives you in here, switching the Dolby Vision mode in the generator between absolute and relative mode. Absolute mode, I think somebody just asked this actually. Yeah, Tom, with absolute versus relative. So absolute is the standard for Dolby Vision. So you're comparing the absolute set in stone values to what the TV can actually do. So if we're looking at Dolby Vision at 10,000 nits, this TV cannot come anywhere near that. It's 715 nits. So we take the readings with the absolute value to see how far off it is, and then CalMan knows how bright the TV is, so you have to put it back into a relative mode. So let's make sure we're in the right mode here. Let's put it back in relative, and we're ready to rock. So AutoCal, this all should look pretty familiar at this point. We're going to do 20-point HDR, and we're going to do it at a delta error of 0.5. Tom, did that make sense that the absolute mode is based on the full 10,000 nit range, whereas relative mode is based on what the TV is actually doing? Hopefully that makes sense. And it's really just so they know where to deploy the tone mapping. So if CalMan knows that the TV is 715 nits, that's where the tone mapping is going to kick in. While we're waiting for this, guys, I've been watching a few movies lately. We've been, at nighttime not really going out and doing anything, but I finally watched John Wick 3, so that completes the trilogy. So I bought all 3 of them. 3 was cool. I still think I like the first one the best, but 3 definitely had some cool stuff going on. What else did I get recently? Ford v Ferrari, that was awesome. I wouldn't put it up there as far as like reference quality video, but the movie itself was great. Sound was great. The audio, the cars racing and the rumbling and the crashes and stuff. The audio was fantastic. Let's see, what else did I get recently? I did buy Shape of the Water. I think that was a Black Friday like $10 4K disc deal. I haven't watched it yet though. I think I might actually watch it pretty soon. I heard it looked really good, but I also heard it was a very weird movie. But it'll be fun to watch. First Man, that was great. I bought that. Let's see, what else have I gotten new? Oh, I did finally buy. I was at Best Buy recently, and they had Dodgeball. It was in the $5 Blu-ray bin, so I made sure to pick that up. Of course, that's a funny movie. I'm waiting for that. I think it's either. And correct me if I'm wrong here, guys. If you know the right, it's either Apollo 11. I might be confusing it with the Tom Hanks movie, but it's either Apollo 11 or Apollo 13. But either way, it's old black and white film footage of the moon landing and stuff, and it's supposed to look fantastic. Tom says that First Man was kind of grainy. Yeah, it was definitely, and I think I know. Why they did that. Because it was kind of a timepiece, based in the '60s or whatever. A lot of times they'll do that on purpose. They'll add some extra grain just to make it look like old film. You notice that a lot in those Marvel shows, which they do just for like some sort of creative decision. But what I did notice, Tom, is that the brighter scenes in First Man weren't nearly as grainy. But I totally know where you're coming from especially with the darker scenes. I want to rewatch Ex Machina. I love that movie. I've only seen it once, but I bought the disc. I want to rewatch it. All these BBC things. I picked up Dynasties. It's about each episode's about a different pack of or family of animals. That one looks really good. I did just recently watch I think it's called Earth at Night. It's on Netflix. It's a like 6-part series. They take these ultra uh, light sensitive cameras and they film these animals and stuff in their nighttime environments. And it's not that it's, you know, super awesome looking video, but the fact that they're getting these images in the dark is really what's impressive about it. If you get a chance, watch the making of. I think Jonathan, I think you and I were talking about this recently, but watch the making of it, man. The cameras these guys are using and where they have to go to get these shots is just, it's really cool. All right, we're getting about halfway through on the grayscale. See, this one seems to be taking a little bit longer than normal, but that's okay. Helson asked if I saw Gemini Man in high frame rate. Yes, absolutely. I bought that disc. It looks fantastic. The Hobbit I did not see in the theater at 48 frames per second. The Blu-ray disc was mastered at 24, so the only way to see The Hobbit is to see it at 48 frames per second, at least to see it in the theater. The Blu-ray disc was 24. So I didn't get a chance to see The Hobbit in high frame rate, but man, Gemini Man at 60, wow. It's a little weird at first. My girlfriend specifically, she didn't like it, which I get, I understand. I liked it in certain scenes. The scenes where there was a lot of action when they are, you know, when Will Smith is chasing Will Smith through the city on the motorcycles, on the dirt bikes or whatever. That looked really good at 60. But I'll tell you guys, where the 60 frames per second stands out to me the most is any kind of scene where something is moving in a very fluid motion. So water, fire, explosions, smoke. The 60 frames per second on that stuff specifically looks really cool. But for those action scenes, what was really interesting was that the scenes were moving very smooth and very fluid. And you guys know, if you turn on them, in this case on this TV, if you turn on the true motion, you get these weird lines and these weird distortions around objects as they move because the motion interpolation's in overdrive. At 60 frames per second, the things still move nice and smooth and fluid like, but there's no distortion. There's zero problems with the picture. It moves the way it's supposed to move. So it is a little weird at first, you know, just watching it. It does take a little bit for your eyes and brain to kind of adjust to it, but once you get used to it, I think it's pretty cool. Jonathan says that the Voodoo version is good to compare. Um, oh, the Voodoo version must be 24 frames per second. So yeah, if you have the disc at 60 and the Voodoo stream at 24, yeah, that'd be a cool comparison to do. Yeah, and Tom, I'm with you. I didn't mind the story with Gemini Man. I thought it was 10 times the movie that that Billy Lynn movie was. The Billy Lynn Long Halftime Walk was another Ang Lee film that was done at 60 frames per second on disc, but it's not a very good movie. I'm sorry to say, but it had some cool visuals and good skin tones and stuff, but it didn't really have any scenes other than at the very beginning of that movie where all the soldiers get into this limo with neon purple lights in it. That scene's pretty cool. There's lots of good dark detail and lots of cool color, but the rest of the movie just stinks. It's pretty bad. Just really weird shots of people's face close up and they're talking into the camera. And I don't know why Ang Lee likes to do that, but he does. They do it a little bit in Gemini Man too, but the Billy Lynn movie was, in my opinion, just pretty terrible. But the Gemini Man movie was actually kind of cool. You know, it's Will Smith. He's a retired assassin. The government's trying to kill him. You know, he's got this whole clone thing going on. And I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, Billy Lynn, man, I honestly, Tom, I couldn't get through Billy Lynn one time. I got about a half an hour into it the first time I tried to sit down and watch it and was like, no thanks. But I still carried the disc around with me for a while just to show people 60 frames per second. Saving Private Ryan, Helson, I think was shot on regular 24 frames per second film. Actually, Jonathan, you might know this. Yeah, Jonathan, yeah, he says it is. So it's 24 frames per second regular film stock. All right, guys, it looks like the Dolby Vision grayscale is almost done. Oh, it's 65 millimeter IMAX. Okay, cool. I keep hearing about 1917. I saw, I think I watched the trailer for it, but I heard 1917 looks very cool too. 1917 was World War One, correct? Was that a World War One movie? Oh, I guess if that's the year, of course. Oh yeah, and all those single take shots too. Yeah, yeah. Okay, where are we at? We're at 7%, so a few more levels to do. I will recommend to everybody that uh, if you're a fan of the movie, I'm a huge fan. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But The Matrix was redone on disc in Dolby Vision. I believe it came out last year or so. But man, it's one of my favorite movies, so I'm a little biased. But they went way, way, way out of their way to make that movie look excellent in Dolby Vision. They did a very, very good job. Okay, my laptop just yelled at me about a low battery, but I'm plugged in, so this is weird. This is one of the reasons why I got a new laptop recently, because this one kept having all kinds of weird issues. And I just unplugged the power and plugged it back in, and the battery warning went away. So good, I didn't lose you guys. I was worried there for a second. Tom brings up a great point. If you don't have test equipment to test bandwidth, using those 60 frames per second movies are excellent because they're HDR, they're high frame rate, they're 4K. So that can kind of be your poor man's signal generator, if you will. Yeah, the big thing with The Matrix for me was the first time I saw, I mean, I've seen that movie a million times. I saw it in the theater when I was in high school. It was just the right movie at the right time for me, and I've always loved it. But the first time I watched it in Dolby Vision on the OLED, you know, that the very first time you see the black background with the green code, you know, kind of flowing up and down and through the screen, and some of the code and some of the letters are like way brighter than others. I mean, it was super, super cool. Oh, so Helson just said that the new Matrix has been postponed on the shooting, which sucks because I was really looking forward to that, but that's okay, as long as they're still going to do it. All right. Jonathan says that the blue and green cast on the Matrix when they're in real life versus in the Matrix is really cool. I totally agree. Funny story. I was a young lad working on the sales floor at a big box store when that movie first came out on DVD. And of course, everybody was running out and buying it. You know, DVD players were new at the time, so this was like the new hot thing. And a customer called in, and I'd helped him pick out his TV and his DVD player, you know, a couple days before. And he was complaining to me, and he was wanted to return the TV because the picture was green. And you know, at the time, I'm thinking, oh, maybe there is something wrong with the TV. But for some reason, it dawned on me to ask, "What are you watching?" And he said, "Oh, that new Keanu Reeves movie, The Matrix." So, you know, well, sir, that movie is supposed to be green in certain scenes. That's how they made it. There's nothing wrong with the TV. Keep just enjoying it. Okay, it looks like it's wrapping up here. It's on the 23rd of 23 points, level 1.4. And let's see how she did. Yeah, I noticed too at the end of John Wick 3, I looked over to my girlfriend and I was like, they can just make these movies forever. You know, the ending of that movie, it's like, okay, obviously they're going to they're going to continue with this. But it's cool. They're fun movies. Jonathan says John Wick is all he needs to do. Yeah, Keanu. I mean, he's perfect for it. All right. So the grayscale on that one took a little bit longer, but the results were excellent. I've got no gray line anywhere, 13 and a half minutes or so. That's okay. But look at the grayscale. Perfect. I mean, beautiful. It doesn't even have those little bumps and green like it did in HDR. The Dolby Vision actually looks like it may have calibrated just a little bit better. I'll take that all day, no problem. Okay, so this is a little bit different than HDR. We have to take some readings of the TV. So CalMan knows how bright the TV is, so it can tell it where to do the tone mapping. And on the 2016 and 17 models, you had to do this, kind of a pain in the butt actually. You had to create this Dolby Vision file, put it onto a thumb drive, and then take that thumb drive and pop it into the TV, and then play something that's in Dolby Vision, and then the file transfers over and the TV configures for Dolby Vision. Because CalMan talks directly to the TV here in the 18 and 19 models, we don't have to do this whole thing with the thumb drive. It's just going to end up happening all right here in the CalMan screen. So the first thing we're going to do is create the Dolby Vision file. I'm just going to save it on my desktop. Once it saves, it's going to read black, white, red, green, blue. Helson asks, he enjoyed Blade Runner 2049 in the cinema, but it was only a 2K projector. Did I see it in 4K in the cinema? Yes, I did. It was awesome. Jonathan, I know you've probably watched this movie 40 times. I have actually not watched it yet on disc. I'm kind of waiting for the right day to where I can watch the old one and then the new one, back to back. I thought that'd be kind of fun. But I actually haven't watched it on disc yet. I was also waiting to move the 65 into the bedroom, which I just did. So I think I'm to a point now where I'm ready. But I did buy the original Blade Runner in 4K and 2049 in 4K. Helson and I watched it in the theater in 4K. It was absolutely amazing. One of my favorite movie theater experiences in my life, actually, to be honest with you. Okay, so the file was written. I click OK. Then we click this upload button. I pick the file. It was on my desktop. I click open. And this is going to upload the file to the TV. And we're going to click next. We're going to turn off the calibration, and we're going to compare our results to the Dolby Vision standards. So we have to switch this back over to absolute mode. And we're going to click next. And post-calibration capture. So fingers crossed. We'll see how it goes. So now we're 728 nits. So the 715 being a little low, it looks like it calibrated back up to about 730, which is kind of cool. And that could have just been a little low because that was the factory setting, who knows. But again, 15 to 33, 715 to 733 rather is not, nobody would ever see it. No big deal. If you're a total nerd about the charts, it might be something you really care about, but yeah, Jonathan says the disc is reference. I'm only assuming you mean 2049. That's all. That's all I've heard from everybody that's bought it, is that it's definitely like high quality HDR. Wow, guys, look at the Dolby Vision. I've got perfect EOTF tracking. I've got a near perfect grayscale. There's a little bit of green right here that I would manually calibrate out if I could, but I cannot on this TV. So I just have to kind of live with it unless I want to run through it again and hope that it doesn't leave extra green. What I really wish, I've talked to CalMan about this before, when you set your delta threshold, so say you set it for 0.5, I wish there was like a variable in there so you could say, I want the delta error to be 0.5 or lower, but also without a positive green error. If they could add that second part of that in there, this problem would fix itself. But again, in the 2020 models, I would be able to go back in here and manually maybe turn up blue or turn down green. Most likely I would turn up blue on these few levels right here and maybe pull that green out. But overall though, like I said, if I don't see it in real life, I don't see it in a test pattern, it's not something I'm gonna lose any sleep over. But yeah, great tracking here, great tracking here. We're 730 nits, our color gamut's pretty much bang on. I think this is a good calibration. We're gonna go additional validation because I wanna see the color checker and I wanna see the sweeps in Dolby Vision. Glenn says, I never understood why they didn't have a green error limit in AutoCal. Glenn, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I've been asking for that for years, and it's never something they've been able to do for some reason. But how great would it be though if you could say delta error of 0.5, but no extra green? That would be awesome. But just one other thing to add to the wish list. Those guys have lots and lots of work to do, and if 3 of us are complaining about one thing, they're probably not going to jump on it right away. If 50 of us were complaining about something, maybe they would. So maybe that's what we should do. I'm really curious about this green and cyan, because remember how far off it was in HDR? Now that we're in Dolby Vision, green is much better, and so is cyan. They're not perfect, but they're a lot better. So that makes me maybe want to go back and rerun the Matrix 3D lookup table for HDR. I thought for sure this TV could do it and could hit all these points, at least come close. So, my gut instinct is to go back and just rerun the 3D lookup table for HDR. But again, I've kept you guys for a little over 2 hours now. I don't want to keep you forever, but you can hopefully kind of see at least a little bit into my mind and what I'm thinking about when I'm looking at these things and what my goals are when I'm trying to calibrate these TVs. And again, everybody's got their different methods and different tips and tricks. Hopefully I was able to teach you a little something and maybe give you something that'll help you get these done a little bit faster, a little bit better in some ways. But again, I wanted this to be fun and more laid back and a little more casual. And I really appreciate you guys hanging out for this whole entire 2 hours. Almost, gosh, we're gonna be probably pushing 2.5 here by the time we're done. Hope everybody's safe and healthy and just tries to have a nice, relaxing weekend. That's what I'm gonna try to do. Jonathan says my voice is so soothing. Appreciate that, buddy. Thanks a lot. We've actually talked about with AV Pro, we've actually talked about doing a maybe a weekly or bi-weekly 10 to 15 minute just podcast just to kind of talk about like latest news and consumer electronics and stuff. And I think if we can figure out a schedule for it, and especially now that we have this kind of downtime where everybody's working from home, this might really actually be a perfect opportunity to go ahead and start launching that and start working on it. But I think it would be super fun. Cool, Glenn. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Glenn. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Brad. How about more calibration webinars in the future, Sony or Samsung? Tom, that actually is on my to-do list. My end goal, what I would really like to do, and of course I can't promise you that I'm going to be able to do this, but what I really want to be able to do for you guys, you can go on YouTube and you can find like reviews and you can find all that stuff. Everybody does that, but nobody teaches you how to calibrate the TV. And our customers, my customers are you guys, the other installers and other calibrators out there. So what I'd like to do, maybe even starting this year, is I'd like to get like the newest model of Sony or the newest model of Samsung. I can go to my local big box store and buy it. I can bring it home. I could do a session with you guys just like this. We can kind of learn it together, and then we can use that TV for a class or something later down the line. But I've talked to some of the folks I work with, and they think it's a cool idea. So if I could get into this rhythm to where I'm getting the newest TV every year from every single manufacturer and doing a session like this, I think that'd be helpful for not only myself to learn, but for you guys too, to see what to expect when you run into these things in the field. Great idea. I would love to do more of it. Cool. So saturation sweeps look pretty good. Nice straight lines. The green's a little bit better, but actually the cyan's about the same as it was in HDR. That blue still twists out here towards magenta a little bit. The reds look about the same. Yellow, magenta, they all look about the same. This is all very normal. Nothing stands out there. We're going to go save and report. This is going to be now my Dolby Vision report. So let's save session and view. as soon as my computer stops thinking about it. Come on. And guys, I can't believe this PC has lasted me like, I think I bought it in 2015. It just started in the last 6 months or so doing some really wacky stuff. You saw earlier it was yelling at me that the battery was low, but it was plugged in. I just unplugged it, plugged it back in, and the battery warning went away. So luckily I just got my new one. Okay, let's see, save session and view. And just let it think for a second. And I'm just gonna pull up the report and I'm going to rename it Dolby Vision report. Of course, you have the before and after. That all looks fantastic. We're gonna click generate, make sure all the data transfers over that's supposed to. Export to PDF. Export to PDF, let me hit it again. Here, I'm not gonna torture it. Let's let it do its thing. Now from here, guys, the hard part's done. You know, I still would, I'm not done, of course. I would still, I'd still want to go back and check all my sources, make sure my Blu-ray player is outputting correctly in the best way it can, you know, make sure my AVR is not screwing up the picture. But, you know, I really wanted to cover with you guys today the workflows and the process, and I wanted you guys to see the AutoCal. But in real life, I would still look at some content. I would check all my sources. And once I was comfortable with everything, then I would call the customer in and go over the before and after and give them the demo, show them the before and after. So, you know, at this point where the calibration is for the most part done, but I still would want to validate a few more things. But of course, you know, I'm not going to keep you guys on camera while I, or keep you guys on the webinar while I check my sources. Seems like it might be a bit of a waste of time for you. So we're going to rename this one My 65C8, and I'm going to change HDR here to Dolby Vision and save. Now I have 3 reports now. I have my SDR report for ISF Dark, I have my HDR report, and I have my Dolby Vision report. So now I can email these reports to the customer. I like to keep a copy of them too, just in case. But that's pretty much it, guys. I don't know if anybody has any maybe additional questions or anything, but the only other thing I might do today is go through and I might calibrate a day mode. But other than that, if you guys don't have any other questions, I will let you guys go. Again, thank you so much for hanging out for all this time. Again, I hope you maybe picked up something new or learned a new trick or saw something brand new for the first time. If you guys have any questions going forward, my email address is jason@avproglobal.com. You guys can always reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm happy to help as much as I can. You know, my job with the company is training and support, so you know, don't be shy about reaching out if you guys have any questions. So with that being said, if there's no other questions in the question box, I'll give it another 30 seconds here or so, and I will let you guys go. Have a safe and healthy weekend, and I'm gonna go eat some of these snacks that I have saved up here. I didn't get a chance to take lunch earlier, so I'm gonna go get something to eat. If you guys need anything from me over the weekend, have any questions that maybe pop up in your head, feel free to send me an email, and we're gonna be back doing webinars starting Monday. Next week, I've got webinars with a brand new customer of ours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So if you guys attend any of the AV Pro webinars next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you'll get to hear from Matt Murray, our CTO. You'll get to hear from Tom Devine, our marketing manager. You'll get to hear from John Tumbleson, one of our programmers. So those guys are going to do the webinars next week, Monday through Friday. I'll do them Tuesday through Thursday. So hopefully I'll see some of your guys' names and faces on those webinars. If not, we will have them all recorded and uploaded to YouTube at some point. Helson, we're going to upload this to YouTube at some point, hopefully in the next couple of days, maybe by Monday. But we'll get everybody those links and stuff. And you guys have a great weekend, and thanks a lot for hanging out, and we'll talk to you later.